All right. So thank you for coming, everyone. I thought I would start first. I did post this Q&A online on our department page prior to the revaluation, but it does address some answers that people have for questions people commonly have about revaluation in general and what the market does and how that affects the values. And so I'm not going to read these whole things because they are in the handout, but I'm just going to highlight some of the important things. And if you have questions about it, feel free to interrupt me with that. Our revaluations are done every 5 years by state statute, and that's statute 1262-B. And as of October 1, 2006, every municipality must revalue every 5 years. So East Haddam's previous revaluation was October 1 of 2017. So that means our scheduled reval was for October 1, 2022. It just so happens the market is high. It was high then, and as I'll be able to explain, it's still high for residential properties. This time it's really a hot market. I think the pandemic had a lot to do with that. We had a lot of influx of out-of-state people that, you know, certainly contributed toward the volume of sales that we had for residential, as well as, you know, the high prices that not just East Haddam, but really all around Connecticut has seen and is still seeing. That said, we didn't pick October 1, 2022 to reval because the market was high. It was just that that's our schedule for reval. And really, as far as revaluation and the assessment goes, we are always capturing, when we do the reval, we're capturing the market at a moment in time. So it's just a snapshot. And so it will stay, the values will stay, the cost tables will stay what they are until the next revaluation in 5 more years. And so, okay, yes, and so the valuation models that we use are then statistically tested in order to ensure that they conform to the state of Connecticut performance-based revaluation standards of accuracy and uniformity in estimating fair market value. That's a lot, but really what that means is we analyze all the sales that have, the qualified sales that have occurred between, the closest is October 1, 2021 through the end of September 2022. We can go back 3 years to analyze sales. You want to have at least 15. Of course, we had way more than that to analyze. The question, what is fair market value? Well, most of us know it's what the willing buyer is willing to pay, and for a property, and the seller also has to be acting prudently, knowledgeably, and in their best self-interest. So assuming that neither the buyer nor the seller is under any undue duress in having to sell. What this precludes that are not considered for purposes of doing a revaluation would be foreclosures, short sales, estate sales, and sales between family members. Even though those might reflect what the market is doing, we don't consider them. And so the other question here is, should I expect my property to be valued the same as what I purchased it for, as long as the sale was within 12 months preceding October 1, 22? And the answer is not necessarily, because what it says, property types, despite similarities, tend to sell within a value range versus one specific price. Therefore, in accordance with the definition of fair market value, our goal is to determine the most probable price, which tends to be in the middle range of recent sales of similar properties. The result is an appraised value that could be higher or lower than what you actually paid for it. Now I can go to the next one. Okay, and so it's asking, the other questions are, what if there haven't been reasonable comparable sales, if things haven't sold? That really isn't applicable here because there were tons of sales. So if not, though, then they consider other factors that may affect the market value, replacement costs, less depreciation, things like that. But again, that's not really pertinent to what we had, but I put it in there because on some cases that might have happened. Same thing if you built your home, we're not going to use the actual construction cost to necessarily arrive at the value. It's only one element that's considered. All right, and another good question is, which people aren't necessarily thinking about till we do a reval. Do property values change uniformly from one revaluation to the next? So in other words, could we analyze all the sales, lump them all together, average it, and say, so everybody's going up by this much, or in some cases down? That's not the case. We have to analyze the actual sales. It's interesting, too, to note, and it's not on here, when every month the town does, the assessor's office has to report to the State Office of Policy and Management all of our sales. Initially, we indicate whether it's a usable sale, which means arm's length transaction, or it's a non-usable sale. So the state already has all that information from the sales ratio that the clerk fills out, and then our additional information on that particular sale. So all along, they keep track of that. Every year, they send the assessor a statement of equalized net grand list. They send us a list what is the actual current market value, even if we're not doing a revaluation, based on our sales ratios. And I'll get into that a little bit more as we get into the actual statistics for our reval here. But when we do a revaluation, it does have to meet criteria that the state sets up for ratio studies. And if it doesn't, they could throw the reval out. So it's really analyzed very, very much, the values, and before it's actually finalized even, starting with the sales. Okay, so here's the golden question. Is the town going to collect more taxes because of the revaluation? A revaluation may result in an increase or decrease of individual taxes depending on how a property value increased or decreased relative to the average change in the town's assessments. A revaluation redistributes the total tax burden more fairly, but does not increase or decrease tax revenue, which is the amount the municipality must raise to operate the local government and support services such as schools, police, etc. So that's it in a nutshell for generically what is done in a reval. Now, for us, so East Haddam, here's our revaluation results. These figures that I'm using are basically the figures that were done right after the Board of Assessment changes in the spring of this year. And these values were reflected in what I reported already to the state. All right, so the next one. The increase in overall taxable gross assessments from 21 to 22. The reason I didn't use 2017 is because the 2021 grand list is predicated on the 2017 cost tables and values. So for 2021, you see the total taxable grand list is $787,939,550. The 2022 is 1,044,730,340, which is an overall increase of 32.59%. Next one. Thanks. The percent increase in overall gross assessments by class. So residential special use, which is PA 490, farm, forest, and open space. The total assessments here went up by 34.45% increase, right? Commercial and industrial, that only went up by a little over 0.5%. So we see that there was the bulk of the increase is the residential, and that is borne out by the sales that we have. I did a little, some reports here of commercial sales that we had to go by. Between October 1 of 2020 and October 1 of 2022, there were 7 usable commercial sales versus 60. Let me just see how many we had here. I actually have that in one of my other 68 sales of residential just in 1 year between October 1, 2022 and June of this year. There've already been 68 residential sales. So that's just for this year, and prior to that there were more. Anyway, let me go on. So the tax burden by land class, this is what a lot of people were really concerned about. And we see that before the 2012 reval in 2011, the residential to commercial ratio was 95% residential to 5% commercial. In 2012 with the reval, it was dead on 94.5 and 5.5. 2016, which was just before the 2017 revaluation, 95% residential, 5% commercial. 2021, same thing, using the 2017 figures. This year, for 2022, it changed, but by 1% in each direction. So the fact that the commercial did, go down from 5% to 4%, we have so little commercial anyways that the impact isn't going to be as great as a town that has, 27% commercial or 25% commercial. And that, if that was to go down a number. So I also did a little comparison with tax exempt data, which includes our schools, our town hall, the churches, other exempt buildings in town. And that is same thing. In 2016, just before the 2017 reval, the taxable to exempt was 92.3 to 7.7. And that the exempt went up a little in 2017, and then it was pretty flat in 2021, and it went down a little. So the taxable went up and the exempt went down a little bit. We did have a little bit of movement back and forth with that. This I also had done right after I got the reval information, because people were concerned about their overall increase. I have that right here. The residential did increase, as we said, this case, the ones that we've used here, 36% overall average. And then by style of home, because for each revaluation, there's going to be a market for certain types of properties. I've been in revals before where raised ranches were all the rage, and those saw a significant increase compared to other styles. Here, what jumped out at me is a really larger, they're smaller values typically, but the cottages saw a 60% increase, overall average increase in value. The others were, if the average is 36, then the antiques are below at 33% overall. Bungalows 28%, capes went up 36%, right on. Colonials 34, contemporaries 35, the conventionals went up a little 38, duplexes 52. So looking at this, you can see where the actual style of homes fell in this revaluation. Condos went up 38%, vacant land 26%. And I'm thinking there might be one more. So these are just the sales report that I ran today for the number of sales that we've had since October 1, 2022, right through now. And because I have heard, that some may be wondering, is the market going down now? So we did the reval in 2022, what's happening with it now? Well, it's not going down. The average number the number of sales we had so far is 68. The average ratio is 62%, and the median ratio is 62%. What the ratio means is the sales ratio. The goal is you're taxed on 70% of market value. So if you have a ratio that's less than 70%, that means our values are lower, that the sales prices are actually coming in higher than what we have. When we're doing a revaluation, part of the criteria, these performance tests that we have to do, the ratios should be between 63% and 77% for the reval. Most of our ratios were, right on in the 60s and 70s. So if your ratios are over 70s, it means your values are pretty high. So with that, the average sale price for the houses that have sold so far, the average sale price is $425,000, $285,000. The median sale price is $334,500. So that means half the houses sold for more than $334,500, and half the houses sold under $334,500. And then the average assessment is $246,463 for the houses that just sold. And I think that's it, right? There's nothing further. Okay. So I don't know, did that help? Does anyone have any other questions? I can't really speak to what the taxes are going to do, except that the mill rate is going down from 31.79 to 25.75. So that typically happens when you have a large increase in value for the reval, the mill rate goes down. My office, and through using, our revaluation company, what we have to do is just redistribute, make sure that there's equity amongst all the property types based on the sales for the reval. We don't determine what the taxes are. That's done through the budget process, per se. Yes?
I have a question.
Yep.
I haven't done the math on it, but is the increase in grand list of 35%, is the decrease in mill rate commensurate with that 35%?
I can't answer that question. So, I mean, I know they were looking at, yes, Rob?
I think commensurate is probably the right word.
Sorry.
People won't hear your answer if you're not by the microphone.
Oh, let me move.
No, he just needs to be by a microphone.
Just the way the percentages work, if you have a 10% increase and it equals X, then that's gonna be like a 8% decrease to equal the same amount. But essentially, it's not completely commensurate because there is a 3.1% increase in expenditures for the town. And because about 80% of the revenue for the town comes from taxes rather than 100%, it means that that equates to about a 4% increase in the tax levy, the total tax levy.
We're assuming a 3.1% increase in the budget's gonna be approved.
That's based on an assumption, correct?
Yes.
Can you speak about the top 10 taxpayers in town? What was the impact on them? If I look at the annual report a couple of years ago, Connecticut Light and Power was the largest taxpayer in town. If commercial values didn't go up and the mill rate goes down, does CL&P actually pay less tax?
That's a good question. So CL&P pays for their personal property, and that's valued every year. And it's really based on what they declare to us. And so often that I've found that that's been higher each year than if they had just declared one beginning value on the personal property, and then it depreciates down each year, bottoms out at 30%, which is what normally happens for businesses. They actually put in the value every year at value versus a beginning value and then depreciated down. Now, not CL&P, but we know there's a lot of construction going on here with, I think it's the gas lines they're putting in. I expect those to be reflected as well this year. That coming up for this October of 2023. And that would be on the personal property again. This is just the real estate. The commercial properties, they did increase 3% overall. So it depended on what type of business or commercial property they had. For instance, apartments went up 5%. Gas marts went down, but some other buildings, restaurants went up 4%, retail went up 7%. So they did go up, it's just not as significantly. But again, we're basing it on the market. And when you consider the effect of COVID, when things literally shut down in April of 2020, and then some businesses went under, some survived, but certainly the sales of the commercial properties, to have had 7 sales, and their sales ratios that we had from October 1, 2020 to 22 were mostly showing 75% sales ratio. One sold 142%, another 109%. So our values were higher than this was previous to the
But if
reval.
residential property went up about 33%.
Yep.
And commercial property is only going up 4 or 5%. And the mill rate's going down 15%, 19%, 18.99.
Certainly not 30.
The math suggests that they're going to pay less, and so more of the tax burden of the town is being thrown on the residents as opposed to
Yeah.
other sources.
That's even the problem. That's the case here anyways, when you have a 96%, 95 prior to this reval, 95% residential and 5% commercial. You don't have a lot of commercial to begin with. So the residential is taking the brunt of it in this case. That's just the makeup of this town, you know. Other towns, you know, if you go branch out to Middletown or East Hampton and other places that may be different in that case. They may see more of an impact if the commercial property goes down, which we have seen across the board, you know, commercial properties have been going down.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to throw darts.
Oh, no, no, I don't take it that way. I
Process,
get
I'm
it.
just trying to understand
Yeah.
logically the impact of who's paying for the increases. And it seems to me more burden is being placed on the residential homeowner as opposed to other revenue sources. It looks like government subsidies, if you will, are less in the tax revenue side of the equation. Just local revenue is down. So everything's being placed on the back of the individual homeowner.
You know, another thing which people don't realize is East Haddam does have a lot of benefits like open space and other tax breaks for certain individuals, and that's wonderful. But all the exemptions, all the you know, PA 490, the things like that people can take advantage of, somebody else has to pick up that slack or pick up that revenue loss. So it's not just, you know, residential versus commercial. It's the, you know, total picture. Again, though, when we're doing a revaluation, we have to go by what's the current market. And you know, not picking and choosing, it's, you know, overall, the commercial properties did go down, not just here. You know, and some went up, like I said, but overall 3% increase. Yeah. Personal property, like I said, with the new, you know, next year we may see something different with the total grand list. This is only the real estate. This doesn't include motor vehicle or personal property. I don't know if that answered your question, but yes, yes.
You said in ratio,
Mhm.
the amount of increase, I wasn't quite sure on that number that you said. Was it 10 or 12% increase in taxes relates to a 8% drop in the mill rate?
Oh, I didn't
No,
say that.
yeah, that was me that said that. No, I'm sorry, I was just using that as an example. I'm by no means a teacher, so I'm not very good at explaining math, but if you take, let's say you took $1 million and you increased it by 10%, then you'd have $1,100,000. If you
Right.
decreased it by 10%, it's not the same percentage of decrease.
But there's not a correlation between the two as far as the mill rate and the tax increase.
I'm sure I could figure that out, but I know that the overall tax increase is a 4% tax increase.
But
You'd have to
put
have a
more
flat
simply-
budget.
Put more simply, if there's a 31% increase in revenues that are gonna come to the town this year in accordance with the grand list, and the mill rate doesn't reflect that change, the town's gonna bring in more revenue this year because that mill rate is not consistent with the grand list increase, correct?
That's correct. It's approximately $1 million of additional revenue, and that correlates with the increase in expenditures.
And yet we're gonna have a budget increase. Makes no sense
Well,
to me.
you'd almost, not to chime in on you'd almost have to have a flat budget for 2 years in a row to have the correlation with mill rate, you know. You'd have to have everything just flat, and that's not really reasonable for,
You're
or,
talking a 4% increase and you're talking about 30% increase in valuation. Pretty big. You understand what I'm saying? So you're evaluating a 30% increase on property value. And and you're talking about a 4% increase in expenditure. I know it's not apples to apples, but it
Yeah,
seems,
yes.
Well, two things. One is, if the grand lists were equalized from this year to last year, the effective mill rate increase is 1 mil. It's an actual 6%, 6 point something drop in the mill rate. It would have been 7 if the budget were flat. So your actual mill rate increase, apples to apples, is 1 mil. Take it into account the revamp. But I have a different question.
Okay.
How do you define cottage? What constitutes a cottage?
The cottages are typically, originally they were built, many of them didn't have heat. A lot of them are very tiny lots, and a lot of them are obviously by the water or, the lake area. Those are typically cottages, sometimes
Let me
seasonal.
clarify the question. You classify what you just described, built in the 50s, 4 walls, no heat, just water. And now, next door to it is a winterized, seasonal, year-round place. Are they both classified as cottages because they happen to be?
I think it
Within a
depends,
stone's throw of
yeah,
the
it
water?
depends on the style of the,
Okay, so-
what they've done to it. So
Okay.
there is a reduction in the landline for seasonal. And if they've now made it year-round, that comes off.
Okay, gotcha.
And so it does go up. It raises the value, yeah.
It's not just proximity to water.
No. Sure.
I'll ask a question on his question. If I have a seasonal and I turn it into a year-round.
Yep.
But is it still considered a cottage, so that even though I went year-round, that would include all cottages and make them go up?
No.
Okay.
It won't include all cottages and make them go up, no.
Follow up.
Yeah, it really has to do, so it does have to do with the age of the structure, the condition, the initial grade, things like that. Cottage you think of as a style, like a ranch is a style, a raised ranch is another style, colonial. So these cottages they have a pretty similar style. Somebody tears it down and builds a McMansion, then, it's not a cottage, but, yeah. Yes,
I'll ask one more question.
sure.
I imagine that assessors talk to each other and the state puts out some kind of publication that sort of says, of the towns that have revalued in this cycle,
Mhm.
where do people stand? I mean, is our 32.5% increase
Is that normal?
way on one side of the bell curve or way on the other?
Yeah, we usually do, the assessors do almost every year. I think I filled ours out. In fact, we do a revaluation survey. I haven't seen too many come in for 2022 yet, but I do know that Vision, who we used, we're doing a couple other towns as well. They did Waterford this year, and I'm trying to think of the other one. I don't have that readily available. And they were seeing the same thing, though, the same type of increase with the values of residential. What was the other town? It was kind of comparable to here. I can always get that info from them, but yeah, that's pretty much what we've seen. Windsor Locks was supposed to revalue this year. They were so, I don't want to use the word nervous about it, but they they thought giving it another year would give time for the market to just, which it's not doing, which is funny, but ironic funny, not ha-ha funny. But they went to the legislature and had their reval postponed a year till next year because they just wanted to make sure that wasn't going to be a huge impact one way or another, and it probably looks like it's going to be anyway. But, you know, they have, of course, the airport, they have all the commercial property, there are a lot of commercial properties, so if those go down, that's, yeah, different makeup.
Is the use
Yes.
of vision, is that what the bid?
Yes, it does, yep. And we did. And there were about, what, three others, or two others, three. I think there were four altogether. So we did that in 2021, put it out to bid in September, I think, right? September, October 2021 for the reval. Yeah, they did a good job. You know what's ironic too, by the way, is they have a reputation for being conservative with the values. So when I was looking at, and I wanted to mention, they leave us with this book that I keep in the office. If anyone wants to come and look at it, this is the particulars of our revaluation and, you know, what they did to arrive at the figures. They have actual, values, analysis, sales, things like that, what they used. People find it handy. They even have, the different grading types, what constitutes, quality home, the grades for the homes. These were the actual sales cards that they went by, that they analyzed from October 21 to October 22.
You raised an interesting point for me.
Yep.
How are they able to assess the quality of the home if they've never been inside the home?
Because in 2017, they did go inside, and
Not every home.
they did try to make an effort. And the other thing is,
I've lived here for 20 years and they've never been in my home.
Never. They keep
I
telling
can't
us we
answer
have
to
things
that.
we don't have.
What's that?
They keep telling us we have assets in our home that we don't have in
As far
terms
as the
of
building
construction.
Assets such as,
And
No, assets, she said.
certain construction upgrades that we don't have.
well, you can have an inspection at any time by my
Yes.
office.
We came to a protest this year, and all they did was compare our house to something that was in Fox Hopper, correct?
Yeah, the other thing is we do data mailers and everybody got that, and that is actually your opportunity to state what's right or wrong on the card. But you also have the option after a reval, any year, you have the option to go to the Board of Assessment Appeals as well.
We did.
With-
Yeah, we
Okay,
did.
did they reduce it for you?
No, they reduced our property by a couple $1,000 is all.
Because there's an easement that's existed for 20 years that
So-
we've lived there.
So with the easements in general, those, if they're not showing an impact on the sales, then they don't have a big impact as far as reducing your value. I have seen cases where, I used to work in another town for years, people were living like near the power lines. I wouldn't want to buy a house right near the power line or under, but you know what? It wasn't impacting the sales, surprisingly. People were willing to pay, and they didn't care that they were under the power lines. They just wanted to be there. So now in another reval that down the road, that may be, they may find the sales. So it's really all about the sales and what they're indicating as far as value. I know there was there were some specifically values or adjustments that the BAA had put on from 2017 reval. And then what happens, we do this revaluation. If the sales aren't warranting those 10% adjustments for this or that, those come off. And a lot of people saw a large increase in value simply because they had been getting a reduction from 2017 all along. That's neither good nor bad. The BAA felt that it was warranted. But when those adjustments come off, it looks like, oh my word, my value went up so high. Whereas if you were comparing what 2017 was originally to now with the actual market, it wouldn't have been, as substantial for them. Yeah.
I wouldn't whine about our own personal assessment doesn't do any
And,
good. But what I wanted to say is that, the criteria or the categories are limited. Cottages, ranches, contemporaries, antiques, and then quality of construction. Okay, so those are basically the criteria. And if you look at that, that you said clearly there were only 68 sales last year. So I think that's what you said.
68 just from this past October to now.
But so, are they really, are there sufficient comparables to justify the changes in some of the home values? Because there are a lot of distinct differences even within those categories of homes.
Right.
And, it just seems like it's a very liberal and subjective rating mechanism that's used to assess these values on a home by home basis.
Yeah. Alls I can say is if you want an inspection to be done, we're having somebody come on board, and I'd be happy to go out with her to do an
It's
inspection.
not going to change things for this evaluation.
It would be going forward, yeah,
We probably
But-
won't be here.
yeah. I don't know if there's anything else.
Any other questions? Thank you everyone for coming.
Yeah.
And if there's anything further that you think of afterwards, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And, to Irene's point, if there's, a survey that's worth having a field appraiser come out, field assessor come out and take a look, please feel free to get in touch and we can have that done. If any adjustments can be made, we certainly are not opposed to doing that. And if you haven't had somebody come in, have somebody come in
Yeah.
if there's things that are.
The goal is within, within 10 years to get inside. The problem is that it's moving in the other direction with that. So it's been that way in a lot of other states for a long time, that the assessor doesn't get in the house. People are, now they don't want someone in their house. Inevitably, what happens in many cases I've found is that when you go to inspect a property, there's things that we didn't have. It just happens that way. So a lot of people complain about something, and then, you go in and say, but you didn't tell us you had this or that, or didn't take a permit out for this or that. So a lot of times it all comes out in the wash, as they say. But data mailers are considered an inspection as far as legally for a revaluation, because you're signing off on that to say that it's accurate. So
Irene, everybody gets those data mailers?
everybody did this time, yes. And so anyway, that's,
When were they sent? Just curious.
They were sent last, I want to say April or May
23,
22,
22, right.
maybe March. I could look. Yeah, so they were sent to all property owners for them to fill it out, or at least correct it if there was misinformation. Yep. Ian, yes,
I have a couple of questions, and I thank you very much for coming tonight,
sure.
most informative. These data mailers.
Yep.
If a resident were to get a data mailer.
Yep.
What do they do with it?
They were to review it, make any changes, sign it, date it, and return it to Vision. There was an address on there to return it to them. Some sent it to us, and then we kept them and sent it, gave it to Vision when they came. And they went through every single one of them, and they entered it on your property record card, online, on our database, whether there was a change or no change. If it was a significant difference, that would warrant them to go out and inspect, and they did do inspections this time. They did all the sales, and then they certainly viewed every home, every property, and some, who needed a further inspection, they did those as well.
In this past evaluation, this past fall, they viewed every house?
They view it, they don't go inside and so forth, but they will drive by to do a field review. They have all the property cards, they'll go street by street.
Sometimes called a windshield survey.
Yes,
Right.
but we did an update this time, not a full revaluation, not a full inspection revaluation. But yet the data mailers, as I was saying, those do count, as an inspection.
Okay, that's the point I'm trying to make, is that, how many did you receive? 5% of them, 50%, do you know, roughly?
I could run a report for that. I don't know how many I received back. Vision received them, and I know there was a lot of them. I'm sure there weren't all 5,000 and some odd, because a lot of people don't return them.
Frankly, I don't think I got one.
Aw.
I remember seeing it. It would have caught my attention, but many people, I think you need to do a better job of communicating what they are, what they mean to the landowner. I don't think anybody really knows. So it probably ends up in the wastebasket before you even get
It
to the house.
might, it is, I think they're pretty, but then again, I work with, the forms, but it is in the form of a letter explaining exact, like 2 paragraphs explaining what it is, and then the details of your property below that.
In 5 years now, we'll be sending one out again.
Most likely, like I said, that seems to be the way of go, but they're also, we're due for the full, them to knocking on the doors. And like I said, we're finding a lot now, and it's been that way in other states, like specifically Texas and in other states, that the assessor doesn't go in. They just, nope. And so they have to do, you'll see more aerial looks and things like that. And there's certain programs that you can buy now, services that will do an overlay of the GIS, or the aerial view, and they can actually measure the homes that way and pick up things. I haven't done that, certainly not here, and I didn't do that in the other town. It can be just another layer with your GIS system.
Yeah.
But if it comes to the point where, in Connecticut, people just aren't gonna want anyone in anymore, then that probably is what they're gonna look at.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next question I have is kind of important, I think. I was told that we had the revaluation, and if you wanted to contest it, refute it, rebut it, you got an opportunity through the Board of Assessment Appeals. And as long as you submitted a form by a certain deadline, and then once that was set by the board, that was it. rigid for 5 years. Sounds like we have an opening and opportunity to go back and have our property values reassessed next year, the next 5 years. Is that a fair statement?
No, per state statute, because it was a problem. I didn't bring that with me because I wasn't expecting to answer the Board of Assessment Appeals questions, but once they make a change, if it's for the reval, that change is effective for 5 years. You can't go back every year, like, well, now I want you to look at this, now I want you to look at this part. What about the land? What about, you can't do that. If they make a reduction, a change, that's it till the next reval. The only caveat to that is, let's say you change your property somehow. You put up an addition, and you don't like what the new value is for the addition. Or you do something else, if there's a change to the property, then you can go back. The other thing to remember is if, let's say you didn't go this year to the Board of Appeals. Oh, I forgot the deadline was February 20th, I didn't go. You know what, but I'm really adamant my value's wrong, I'm gonna go next year. You can go next year, but when you're stating what your value is, it's gotta be based on market value October 1, 2022, not 2023 or 2024. So when you do appeal, you always have to realize that you're appealing that value, not current. And as the sales are showing right now, the market's still increasing here. And I think a lot of other towns as well, but certainly here I'm seeing it. A lot of out-of-state people coming in and buying properties, you know, which is, it's a beautiful town, so you got that too, which is really a lovely place to be, I think. Yeah. Did you have a question? Yeah.
I did. I made changes to that form and I sent it in. How do I know that they received it? Because we also, they had extra things on there that we don't have.
You know what, you can check tomorrow or whatever with us, either email me at assessor and just ask for that info if they entered, because they would have entered the data mailer info and whether or not they made a change because of it. In some cases, they'll put change, in some cases, they'll put no change, but they may have reviewed something else. They'll indicate that.
On their street card, can they find that by going into?
Oh, yeah, you could do that.
Database
Uh,
of the assessor?
No, I don't,
Oh, no?
it might be on the property record card that they see. So if it's
Try that.
not,
If you wanted to try that tonight, you could try that tonight.
Online.
And if it's not there, get in touch tomorrow. and
Right.
we're-
right,
Do they give you a listing of all of the revaluations they do on each property? Comparisons and how they came up with the price, the value?
that's, yeah, that's in the, it's not all how on every single one. The thing is with the revaluation, we're doing mass appraisal, we're not doing an individual fee appraisal. So there's a different methodology. It takes the group of properties as opposed to an individual one that you have 3 comps or 4, sometimes 5, and know everything. It does group them, by same characteristics, same, similar location, things like that. It does do that. The values are in the book here, this book that we have, as well as the sales books that they actually used. I mean, the cards for the sales are there.
Is there a record of the comparables that were used for each property?
They, like I said, it's mass appraisal. They're not going to have on each card, here's your comparables. But you're going to be able to see the similar styles and values, yes. They analyze, similar properties by, let me see if I even have this written down. I might have this from the state, from my handbook. Okay. So these are, we have two types, is ratio testing standards and procedural testing standards for the revaluation. So let me just see. Okay. Might be easier to just. Okay, no, I know I have it here, stay tuned, there, well. So what we do, the ratio standards measure the level and uniformity of the assessments based on well, I'm not seeing it here. I did read it today too, but I guess it wasn't in here. But when they do the values, you're comparing similar things. So you're comparing homes that have, so you're comparing style, you're comparing number of bathrooms, you're comparing like square footage, neighborhood. When you do a revaluation, the first thing you're valuing though is land. And so you can have the similar, almost identical house in a different parts of town, and they could be different values because of what the land, the neighborhood is showing. So there's a lot that goes into that, and I think it was this book is where I read it from, so my apologies. But like I said, you're welcome to come in and look at that and see. I feel like it's kind of after the fact now, because I know most people are worried about what are my taxes going to be. That's the big question. Whereas, you know, the reval is already done, we don't do taxes in my department. It's just, you know, uniformity of value. That makes sense. I don't know. Is it?
All right, well, thank you all for coming.
All right, thank you. Yep. Feel free, like I said, to email if you have any other questions specific, or if you want to look at the book, we'll make that available. Thank you for hanging out with me.